Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Devoe.
And I'm Mark Stay. And as always, a whopping great thank you to everyone who helps keep this show on the road. That's our Bestseller Academates and our patrons over on Patreon. The Academy, we're going to talk about the Academy in a second. If you want to sign up to that, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. You get me and Mr. D as your one-to-one tutors and amazing courses, amazing community. And also, if you want to support us on Patreon, pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. There you get access to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of extra material. We've had deep dives recently on police procedurals. We've had them on Chat GPT. We've had them on how to write a novel with Tim Lott. We've had on marketing, on SEO, all sorts of amazing stuff. It's all there for grabs, people. All you need to do, pop over to Patreon, bung us like $10 a month, and the world is your oyster.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah, talking of the Academy, Mark, we had we had an applicant from someone this week. It's fascinating, who sold six-figure books, but in a children's genre and pivoting now to an adult genre. So we get all kinds of really interesting people who are kind of starting their journey in different streams. So if you want to hang out with people, I mean, we've got best-selling authors. It's an incredible place to hang out. The application window is now open for September enrollment. So pop along, as Mark said, to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com because we are filling up fast. So Mr. Stay, how's your week been this week?
I went to that there London town yesterday.
Oh, exciting trip on the train.
It wasn't exciting. Well, coming up was a nightmare, but getting there was fine. I went there to record my introduction to the audiobook of The Holly King. Now, The Holly King, when this episode goes live, is out 1 month from now. So it's coming out 14th of September. Very exciting. I've got Candida Gubbins again as narrator for the audio. She's so good. I mean, when I'm very aware of it now. When I'm writing the novels, not only do I hear her voice in my head, but I'm also aware that, oh gosh, this is one page and she's going to have to do 4 different voices, one of which is an accent, because there's a character in the new book called Pearl. And I won't spoil it for anyone, but it requires a very specific kind of accent. She's so good. She's so good. It's absolutely brilliant. So you're in for an absolute treat. So pre-order that from your audiobook supplier now.
I want to ask about this intro. This is really interesting. So because this is kind of cool. So as the author of the book, how does it work?
Each book has a paragraph with the date and a little bit of history to put it in context. And with the Crowfolk, I didn't know they were doing this, so I don't do it on the Crowfolk, but I've done it on all the others. I think it was the producer went in and did a kind of newsreel introduction. So it's like, June 1940, war has been declared. So I thought, I can do that. So I said, can I do any other ones, please? Can I? So for each one, I've done a little introduction. So this one's like December 1940 as the winter draws in. So I do this kind of newsreel introduction in my Mr. Chumley Warner voice. So
Mr. Chumley Warner, I love
Hello.
it. Mr. Chumley Warner. I think that's fantastic. Well, how brilliant is that? Because I know a lot of authors often think about being their own narrator of their author books, which is quite rare, isn't it? I mean, when we have Bryan Cranston on, but then Bryan Cranston, it's different if you're kind of,
an actor.
An actor and your autobiography. I think that's fair enough. You probably want it in the voice of the person who's written it. But that's a lovely way of stamping a little bit of you in the audiobook. So there's a tip for everyone, is that, think big. Think about when your book's going to be published. It will be an audiobook, and write that paragraph at the beginning that you can then say to the publisher or to whoever you're working with. If you're doing it self-published, you can say whatever you want, basically.
Too right.
But that's a great way of just having your little. Do you know what? It's the Hitchcock moment, isn't it?
Yes,
the Hitchcock moment.
I get cameos in the films I write, and I have to do the little bit of the audio. It's shameless. I'm just shameless. I'm just totally shameless. Sorry,
but you know what? I think that's brilliant. I think it's fun, and it's like it means that, you know, it's not just about sitting in the dark room writing all day long. You get to go out and have a trip to London. Okay, so here's a question though. Like, how long did it take you to record that paragraph?
It was about 5 minutes.
I was just going to say, I knew it was going to be 5 minutes, or it was going to be like
2 hours on the train.
Because if you've got one paragraph to do,
I know,
you know, the pressure to get it right. Oh, can I just do that again? Oh, come on, we got to get on with the rest of the book.
I don't know if you've seen, one of my favourite comedies is Toast of London, you know, where he does voiceovers all the time. And I'll put a clip in the show notes where he goes in to record it and it's just one word, yes. And it felt like that. I just went in, did my paragraph. And actually, I did hang around and I listened to Candida narrating 3 chapters. And it was just a joy just to be there live, listening to it happen.
Just a good excuse. Do you know what it is? It's just a stealth way of getting into the studio, isn't it, really?
Oh, yeah, too right. And it's air conditioned as well. It was really hot yesterday.
In London. Very nice. That's brilliant. But also, it's nice to be a part of that. It's nice to be, it's like being on the set of the movie, isn't it? It's like nice to witness the creation of it. And it gives you a bit more of an insight into how it all works as well for people who've never done it. I was actually invited to go to the printing press of when we were printing off Jen's very last monster book. They said to us, I said, whereabouts is it? They said, Manitoba. I'm like, Manitoba? That's like the equivalent of flying from like England to Japan or something. I don't know. Slight exaggeration. But no, they said what we offer authors is if you want to go to the factory, you can stand there and watch the first copy of the book come off the press and we'll give you that copy of the book. And I thought, how brilliant is that you actually get to see it made? So yeah, there's all kinds of fun things you can get involved in that you just don't realise.
Authors, if you ever get a chance, do that. It's because we took some authors to Clay's, which is one of the big printers in the UK, and it was fascinating. It was, you know, proper sort of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kind of tour.
I was just thinking, like it's like the Cadbury's factory, isn't it?
Yeah, it's terrific.
Oh,
really
talking of Charlie and Chocolate Factory, I saw the preview for the Wonka movie that's coming out, I think, at Christmas over here, because I was sitting in the second row of the Barbie movie because there was no seats left. There were I literally could not get a seat. It was ridiculous. Like we got the last like 2 seats, I think, and then we had the old kind of neck strain by the end of the. But I've got to say, I was as amused by the film as I was from all of the people that showed up wearing pink. Was this a thing?
Totally
in England?
Yeah,
it was
completely.
Utterly bonkers. Like there was like there were just the most amazing get-ups. It was like being at like a Lord of the Rings kind of opening weekend
cosplay.
Movie,
yeah.
It was cosplays for like everyone from little kids up to like grandparents. It was unbelievable. That film's made a movie.
It's brilliant. It's made $1 billion in 17 days.
17 days, which I think is the fastest grossing movie of all time, which I mean, I have stats for everything.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It wasn't what I expected. It was a little bit bonkers, but you know, I think good on them, right? Good on them for going. And I know what you meant about how, like, I'm still trying to get my head around how Mattel come out selling more Barbies out of this. Do you know what I mean? It's so messed up. It's like, wow, this is like the sponsor of the film.
Slight spoiler if you've not seen the Barbie movie, skip the next 30 seconds. But it had, you know, a few weeks ago you were talking about the Barbie that gets drawn on and has, you know, wonky legs and everything.
Realize,
they had it in there. Yeah. And they're actually releasing one of those Barbies now. They're releasing a tie-in messed up Barbie, a weird Barbie. So, you know, I know what to get you for Christmas.
I want one of those. Yeah. My girlfriend was really upset though because she said that they didn't swap Barbie heads. That was what she always did apparently growing up. She used to swap Barbie heads. There's a lot of mutilation that went on. Yeah, exactly. Brilliant stuff. Anyway,
so Mr. D, how are things going with your non-fiction book? I'm your accountability partner.
I know. Okay,
are you still working on it? Come on.
I am. It's actually ramping. Okay. Everyone knows this feeling. Well, I say everyone. I haven't had this feeling in a long time. Anyone who's ever tried to write a book, this is the feeling you want. It's the feeling where something happens, you have a breakthrough moment, might be in your plot, it might be with a new character. But I had a breakthrough moment this week where like the stars aligned and suddenly I'm looking at this going, yes, this is it.
Excellent.
It's like that moment where I just went, oh, and the thing is I've had to work, literally I've been working solidly over the whole summer on this pretty much. I filled an entire notebook, hundreds of pages. so many. It's a scattering of crazy ideas. A bit like exactly, there's so many parallels in fiction writing. You know how we talk about like you whack down notes on cue cards or postcards, and then you scatter them around, you move them around, and you try and look for connections. I've been doing that. It's been like a proper detective hunt. But this week something happened, and it has literally taken the whole thing to a completely new level. And to say I'm remotely excited is a total understatement. I am absolutely buzzing, and now it's like it's constantly on my mind. That's the moment, isn't it? That every author needs to get to. It's like you get so into your book, the plot or the message that you're writing about, and you wake up in the morning thinking about it. You go to bed thinking about it. You're writing stuff down as you're doing the washing up because you're thinking about it. That's where I'm at right now. So I'm gonna. Very good. I'm gonna commit to doing this. I kind of hasten to say a deadline, but I'm gonna say a year, and for the first book. So we'll make a date. I think what we'll do is we'll tie it in with the end of August. So we've got because that's tied in with the academic year as well.
Is that a public declaration?
A public declaration, Mark.
Excellent. I'm putting that in the diary.
I now feel confident that I've got enough substance to write something worth putting out there. That has been my biggest challenge. I think a lot of authors like why should I write a book? There's thousands of booklets. But now I found the unique voice part, which is the bit that I was looking for. So I just want to encourage anyone else who's been struggling with, whether you're writing fiction, non-fiction, just keep on writing notes and just writing stuff down. And I promise you, eventually something clicks and it's almost like it starts to reveal itself. It's like the classic chipping away at the rock. You know that there's the sculpture behind the rock, and all your job is to chip away at the rock. It's not to build a sculpture, but it's to find out what's hiding behind it. So I'm going to take you on a journey, everyone, through the creation of this book. I'll be revealing I registered the .com mark this week. Yeah.
Nice.
It's a one-word.com with 8 letters, which is very rare to get these days.
Wow.
So yeah. And
I'm intrigued now.
I'm going to just leave you all hanging. I'll leave you all hanging, but I'm very, very excited. So
brilliant.
And I think it's a kind of book that's actually, I think the world needs. I think the world needs this book. So that's giving me a lot of motivation to get it written as well. So
brilliant. Now, listeners, you know as much as I do at this point as well. I'm not pretending not to know. I genuinely don't know what the hell this is about. So this is
I haven't told
great.
you, not even offline.
No, this is great.
I hope I don't build it up too much. Excellent. Anyway, let's dive into this week, Mark. This week we've got. This is a whole, again, we talk about every, stuff that we've never heard on the podcast. This is a first, isn't it? Absolute first.
Totally a first. This is where we have Damian Dibben, who is a Renaissance man. He's an acclaimed British author. His novels have been translated into 27 languages, published in over 40 countries. His series, The History Keepers, international publishing phenomenon. He's trained as an artist, a scenic designer. He's been an actor and a screenwriter. And as we discover, he's got another string to his bow, which is just extra. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but this is just extraordinary. We've had tie-in merchandise before, but nothing like this. And he's got a new novel, The Colour Storm, which explores seismic events of the past, and it's terrific, and it is a joy for the senses, this book. So we discuss tips for writing about colour, why writing is like getting into the sea, and why this novel has its own extraordinary tie-in merchandise.
Brilliant stuff. You're going to enjoy this one, folks. So let's sit back and listen to Mark chatting with the absolutely fascinating Damian Dibben.
Damian Dibben, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, sir?
Very well on this chilly Tuesday, May morning.
Indeed. But look, it's a colourful morning, and which segues beautifully to your book, The Colour Storm. That's probably one of the worst segues I've ever done. But what a wonderful, wonderful book. And it's a book that just blossoms in the mind, blooming with colour. Tell us about this book, which I believe started with an exhibition at the Royal Academy. Tell us how it all came about.
Yeah. So the book is all set in the art world of the Renaissance, and it's all about the search for a new colour. Amongst all the artists of the day, and our kind of hero is Giorgione, who's a kind of lesser known painter, but a kind of utterly pivotal one in the history of art, who sadly died in his early 30s, before he'd probably, done his best work. But he was alive and competing with, the likes of Michelangelo, Raphael, Leonardo, Bellini, Titian, the list goes on. This was a kind of, the absolute height of the kind of the Renaissance in the early 16th century. And the idea came about in two separate ways. As often happens, you kind of have this little bit of alchemy. Firstly, I had been to see an exhibition of Giorgione and his contemporaries, and I knew the name, but at the Royal Academy about 7 years ago, and I knew the name, but I didn't know that much about him. And then I kind of discovered that he was, one of the first colorists, as it were, which kind of Venice became famous for. He was possibly one of the first people to paint a landscape painting, and he was certainly one of the first people to sort of paint mood and atmosphere, for their own worth, and whereas the sort of Florentines, in the Roman school, the Leonardos and Michelangelo, it was all about the form and the body and the soul. And the Venetians were very much about kind of, it was almost Impressionism, sort of 300 years before. It was kind of the time of the day and the sort of the feeling of the seasons and the weather and, the breezes and so on, and that sort of created these incredible atmospheres. So it was fascinating seeing that exhibition. At the same time, I was here reading this story about a contemporary artist, Anish Kapoor, who had recently copyrighted this color, Vanta Black, which was kind of, I don't know if you know about it, but it's kind of the blackest black. It kind of it takes in sort of 99.6% of 99.96 or something percent of light. So it's kind of like looking into the abyss. Anyway, he copyrighted this black, and it started this whole kind of miniature war between all these artists, who then, there was another artist who basically then created the pink is pink, and he'd allow anyone to use it but Anish Kapoor. And it was slightly, he literally said on his website, this is available for anyone except anyone, working on behalf of or connected to Anish Kapoor. So it was a kind of, more trivial kind of competition. But it made me think, having kind of seen the exhibition of Giorgione, how important color would have been, to the livelihood of artists. And if you could discover, a new color, a new mineral in this age of kind of, world expansion and sort of trade suddenly everywhere, and kind of money, flowing through Europe like never before, your name could be made in a way that could sort of not only kind of make you rich and famous in your lifetime, but for all time, and to be remembered for all time. Given that the ultramarine, which literally meant from across the sea, was the sort of star color of the Renaissance.
Yeah.
And this is imagining a color even more incredible than an ultramarine. So yeah, that's how the story started.
Yeah, and you set yourself a huge challenge here, because writing all writers listening to this, we know that writing about color, we'll sit there, we've got to describe the sky again. How do we describe blue, without going to azure or lapis?
Yeah.
So you've set yourself a huge challenge about writing an entire novel about color. What were how did you get around just falling back on the same old cliches? What was
It went back to probably, because I trained originally at art school, and you obviously you learn about how to mix colors, and you kind of learn about opposing colors. In the spectrum, you have one color, and how you mix kind of in the opposing color, then you sort of create this sort of shadow of that color, and all these tricks, and it just makes you kind of think in a more original way. There's always an original way to describe a color, because you just sort of link it to something unexpected, and you usually there are colors that you know quite well, but you never really thought of as colors. I mean, I'm just thinking of one description that sort of describes these colors that are coming up in Sybil's cheeks, who's the sort of heroine, and it describes this very, very subtle color that you might find in the bend of a seashell. So you'll know these things and you'll see it, and then you'll kind of create your own version of that when you read about it. But that's a tiny example. Obviously, every page is kind of littered with some description of a color. And, the best way to do it is just to refer to another completely different object that everyone will be familiar with. Right. And everyone will have a sense of what color that it means to them. But of course, it's all subjective. I mean, color is, everyone's looked at something and, with their partner and go, well, that's blue. No, that's grey. That's.
Is it also the case? It's one of these things that the more you start writing about something, in this case, colour, do you start now seeing colours everywhere that you never saw before?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also different shades of colour. There's a big, there's a sort of section in the book where he sort of talks about how there are 90 different types of yellow. And suddenly you it's just because you look at objects normally, you don't necessarily take in their color unless they're very sort of bright or garish. But yeah, you suddenly become aware of there's like 50 different shades of indigo in your own bedroom in one form or another. And obviously everything possesses a color, and also those colors change during the day, or they change in someone's dress, or in literally in their skin, so it's this sort of ever-changing kind of landscape. But Fantastic. Yeah, the more you look, the more you see.
Absolutely.
I was watching something on telly last night, and there was someone, I think it was MasterChef actually, but there was someone talking about being colorblind, and I just thought, oh my God, I'd hate that so much. I mean, you couldn't see anything, couldn't tell the difference between any colors, and one's life would be so empty without it.
Well, it's perspective. You're seeing the world in a slightly different way. There's an argument that we don't all see the same yellow when we see a yellow. We all perceive it differently. So I think we're all on a spectrum, if you like, of how we perceive the world. So that challenge of writing color is incredible. And again, like you say, every page of your book, listeners, if you've ever wanted to know how to describe color, just like as with Patrick Süskind's Perfume, if you ever wanted to know how to write about smell, grab a copy of The Color Storm. This story is also about obsession, and it's about an artist wanting to, in a very competitive time, wanting to leave their mark. Is that something that you can relate to as you've studied art, you've been an actor, you're also a writer. Is that something you think about when you're writing, leaving a mark, what impression your work might leave?
I mean, I think, we all want to leave a mark somehow. I mean, it is very much the theme of the book, but I think as you go through, you realize, there's the mark of fame, and who doesn't want that? And it's just, it sort of horrifies me, I suppose, how many kind of great artists in the past essentially died in poverty, being unrecognized. I mean, obviously Van Gogh being probably the most obvious example, only sold one painting in his whole life. You sort of rail against that, but it also very much becomes about actually the mark you make around the people around you, and the choices you make, and sort of your kindness, if that doesn't sound too glib, your sort of your everyday heroicism, and the difference that makes. And there's this sort of continual kind of interplay between those, that sort of bigger ambition and that sort of ambition to actually just do the right thing by the people around you and the people close to you. But which writer doesn't think of that? I mean, it's a natural part of life to want to leave something behind, I suppose.
Absolutely. Well, in your case, you're also leaving behind physical objet d'art. I mean, we've had authors who they might have a tie-in mug or a T-shirt, but you've got an art collection of furniture and art. Tell and our listeners, I'll put a link to this in the show notes. Tell us about the Color Storm collection. Yeah,
so I mean that came about because I've always, since I went, in fact, before I went to Oxford, since I was a child, I've always made things, and it's got more and more elaborate as time has gone on. And it's a sort of perfect antidote to sitting in a desk kind of writing, and it all starts with a drill or with a kind of electric saw or something. And more, it just got more, the things I was making became more and more ambitious. And I was so kind of swept up in the world of this book, of these kind of incredible craftspeople, because an artist studio, the painter was just one person, he was a sort of figurehead, but then there was like 50 or so artisans, helping with the production of that painting or with the sculptures. So, and I started making things, and of course, everything inspired by color was the thing that sort of tied it all together. So these sort of fantastical objects, like there's this cocktail cabinet with this sort of in lapis blue with these wings and with these sort of Chinese embroideries inside, and then I've got a chandelier with kind of real birds taking off from it, and a kind of big flight of red drawers with a sort of eagle taking off from it. And yeah, they're all sort of tied with, linked in with the book, and it just seemed like a good idea. I mean, so I was kind of doing the two things in tandem and writing, writing the book and creating these pieces at the same time. And it was very enjoyable.
They are extraordinary, and listeners, do check them out. Like I say, I'll put a link in the show notes. But I have to ask, was all this furniture making, was it just procrastination to get out of writing? Because we're all familiar with that.
I mean, no. Well, I think when anything becomes work, it becomes its own. I mean, I started procrastinating about doing the furniture as well. So
right.
I think that's just. I read somewhere about procrastination, because it is a thing, and I think I read it was to do with sort of the fear of going into the unknown. Yeah. And I often describe like starting a writing day a bit like kind of getting into the ocean. I mean, you just sort of, when it's cold, and you don't really want to do it, but you'll feel better when you do.
Yes.
And you sort of, you might go and buy an ice cream or do anything before you sort of finally like face it. And then you kind of, once you're swimming around, you know what all the fuss was about. And it's just, you don't know where you're going to go, and that should be fun. But for some reason, it's also sort of mildly terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we all know once you start, once you tie yourself to the desk.
Absolutely. No, so that's a lovely metaphor, actually, because some of us kind of hop in, it's cold. Some of us go and make a great splash, and some of us get dragged out to sea. So
yeah.
Well,
I think it's got to be it can't be just a lovely, warm Caribbean sea. It's got to have a bit of a bite to it to get that full procrastination.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at where the writing started for you. As I said, you studied at art school, but you're an actor as well, and then you moved into screenwriting. So, tell us about that and what you learned from that.
I mean, I did it for about 10 years, and I mean, I was actually acting at the time, and I was obviously reading scripts, and I just, like many people do, I just had to go at writing a script, and it actually sort of took off really quickly, and I sold that in America, that first script, and then that led to essentially, I mean, just that one script led to sort of 10 years of employment, a lot of it in Hollywood, and I worked for some amazing people, for some amazing company, but it became progressively, as I'm sure so many screenwriters will say, sort of demoralizing because of the way the whole business of films work. Any producer will have to develop about 10 times more than they'll ever be able to make, because you never know which one's going to happen. There's no sort of surefire thing. And because of those numbers, that also means, you only 1 in 10 of the things that you write will sort of either be picked up or go a bit further or sort of continue to be developed. So the numbers are just stacked against you. And I mean, the pay is incredible, but it gets increasingly sort of disheartening, I think, and I mean, I just remember spending those 10 years just trying to explain to my family that I did actually have a proper job. And they were like, well, where are the results? It's hard to explain, it's one of keep telling me to do it. And at the time I had been, one of the things, I was being sent books because I'd sort of found myself in the kind of family film world, like DreamWorks, and I was being sent books kind of, with a view maybe to adapting them. And then that's when I thought, oh shit, maybe I should write a book, and that would be a kind of quicker way to make it happen.
Which leads us beautifully to The History Keepers, which is this magnificent trilogy of children's adventure stories. The Storm Begins, Circus Maximus, Night Ship to China. And the rights have been sold to Working Title. So tell us about the History Keepers and how that came about. It's about a boy who finds out his parents are lost in history, and he joins this secret service to track them down called the History Keepers. And they're a kind of set of, for lack of a better way of saying, double agents who sort of travel through time, to sort of maintain the course of history. And each episode, takes place at a different point in the past, sort of a key moment in the past. The first one, in the Renaissance as well, and then the second one in ancient Rome, and then the third one is in imperial China, kind of Ming Dynasty China. And there is supposed to be a fourth, if not a fifth. It was. It's a long story, but I'm really hoping to get to it one day. Unfortunately, all of my team that was around me, because it was Random House who'd originally bought it, and when they merged with Penguin, nearly 10 years ago now, the whole team essentially left. Right.
But there was kind of no one there anymore to spearhead it, and they've kind of gone to the winds. My main editor went to Australia, in fact. But I get letters. I mean, not letters, but emails.
Yes.
On a daily basis, because I do leave it on this terrible cliffhanger.
Right.
It couldn't be worse. And I remember saying to my editor, I can't really leave it like this. What if there isn't another book? And she was like, well, no, you have to. Got to always make them want more, as it were.
Right.
I'd love to get back to it at some time. But it's very much, it's the kind of, it's like how, I mean, that originally started because I found an old, wasn't a school book as such, but it was a book I had when I was at school, and it was called The History of the World. And it kind of, I mean, literally called that. And it was sort of a picture book, and it was, went through all the civilizations and kind of how they connected. And I just thought, obviously, this is the greatest story of all time, because it is the story of all time. how could you kind of tell it? How can you start to tell, some of these things? The fact that, the course of history can change in one day because of kind of some discovery or an explorer or a battle or and the history can be sort of controlled by individuals, some great big parts of the world literally under the control of one man or one woman. And just if you just tinker with a few details, how that could completely change the course of things. And that was the kind of backdrop to telling these stories. But yeah, it's an adventure. It's a sort of, it's my love of James Bond and Indiana Jones is very much at the fore, I guess, in these kids' stories, lives. But it's kind of emotional as well. That obviously he's lost his family, and Jake, the sort of hero, then we discover his brother had also disappeared. And he hadn't realized he was also working for the Secret Service. So there's this sort of thread throughout, this sort of emotional thread of keeping everyone together.
Well, fingers crossed for a fourth and fifth. I know how important that relationship with an editor is, because it's not just that they edit your book, but they are your champion within the organization of the publisher, and they bang the drum for you. But it's also is a very small industry. And even when people go to Australia, they have a weird way of coming back again and cropping up another publisher. And, so it's, I've seen these things happen. So yeah, fingers crossed we hear more from the history keepers. But then you pivoted to adult fiction with a wonderful book called Tomorrow. And I love the pitch for this, because it's about an immortal dog that was inspired, I believe, by your Jack Russell Dudley. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I'll just tell you the book. So it's narrated, as it were, by a dog who is 217 years old. And he lost his master, who is almost certainly also immortal, 120 years ago, and he's been sort of searching for him ever since. And this story spans 250 years, and it's, takes in all the great changes of kind of what they call the sort of early modern period of history, from about 1600 to the 1850s. And all this sort of kind of enormous sort of change and revolution. It was very first inspired. Sometimes you look into the eyes of your dog and there's something kind of like ancient seems to be there, as if they really have, lived through the sort of hundreds of years of time. Actually, Dudley sadly passed away, but he lived till he was 19. So it's quite a long time, but he always kind of looked like this sort of ancient philosopher, he was probably just thinking of dentistry or something, but that was the sort of inception point. And I'm so proud of the book, because it's sort of, it's obviously about people, but it telling the story in that way, and it's sort of about kind of love, loyalty, and ambition, and what you would do if you were immortal, because essentially there are two human characters who both go in very, very different ways, and kind of one is the kind of nemesis, the antagonist character, and one is this master who is obviously lost. But it's interesting what you were saying before about telling the story through senses, because like perfume, that story is totally told through smell, because obviously a dog's ability to smell is kind of, I don't know, literally sort of 1 million times more. Ridiculous. History was a very smelly place. It's not like today in our sort of clean, air-conditioned world. The world kind of stunk in ways that it doesn't anymore, and it became so fascinating to be able to tell the story from a kind of, from a dog's ability to sort of smell point of view, because a dog can smell emotion as well as everything else.
Yes.
In humans. So yeah, I will always kind of love that book for that, for the reasons that it was a sort of very, very special place in my heart. But I guess all books are.
Absolutely. Wonderful stuff. Well, you seem to be working your way through the senses. So what's coming next from you, Damian?
I'm actually writing. I've kind of decided to go. I'm just quickly writing a screenplay of The Colour Storm.
Oh wow!
I'm writing it on spec, but there are kind of various people who are interested. But I, to put myself in a more commanding position, I'm just writing it, and I'm really enjoying it because I actually haven't written a screenplay for like 10 years, and it's kind of it's just so screenplay sort of centric. So that's fun. And then after that, all I can say is I'm going to write this. It's kind of a ghost story, but one the likes of you wouldn't have read before. A very emotional ghost story, if that makes sense, and one that feels completely grounded in reality. That you can't. It doesn't really feel like a ghost story at all, but it is one. But that, I won't say any more on that because it'll jinx it.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Well, it sounds fascinating. I'm really, really looking forward to it. But in the meantime, folks, grab a copy of The Colour Storm, if for nothing else, just to see how colour is described in more than just the usual kind of trite ways that I do anyway. Damian, thanks so much for speaking to us and hope to speak to you again soon.
No, it's a pleasure.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. I don't know about you, Mark, but I picked up 50 Shades of Grey and I didn't pick up anything about colour whatsoever in that book. It was very, very confusing.
It was. I just keep thinking, so about Anish Kapoor copywriting The Blackest Black. I just kept thinking of Spinal Tap, where they had that album cover that was just black. It's like, how much more black can that be? And the answer is no more black, so it's fantastic. But this is great because writing about colour and the senses, this is something... I know it's a weakness, so I focus on it all the more. And we're going to talk about that more in the extended. We've got a whole thing about writing not just colour, but all of the senses. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But it's brilliant. I think his advice is brilliant.
This is really fascinating because I think for me, it's something which we should all attempt to do as authors, is to write something around the senses and colour is one of those things that, I don't know about you, but it's not some place I'd naturally go to. I mean, because we think about smell and taste, and obviously oral senses, AU. But the idea around writing colour, you've got to really stop and think about that, haven't you? It's a very we see colour all around us every single day, every minute. I mean, I'm surrounded in colour right now. But it's not a natural thing that we're drawn to write about because we just think of primary colours typically, don't we? Or like painting kits, but not. Yeah. And I was fascinated by how Damian would, even just in the interview, how he would you'd see him like, he'd go off into that world and start describing like so much more there, isn't there, to be untapped?
Yeah. Absolutely. More in the extended version, folks.
Absolutely.
More in the extended version.
Then one of the things Damian talked about was procrastination, which was interesting.
We love that. Yeah.
We love a bit of procrastination, don't we? Yeah. But I like the way that he described it. I mean, we can sit and debate what procrastination is and why we do it until the cows come home, which would be a great way of avoiding writing anything. But
exactly, yeah.
But the way he said it's the fear of getting into the unknown. And I really like that, because what is life other than the unknown? Like every second that we move forward in life, it's unknown as to what's going to happen next. And he mentioned as well, he used the analogy of water, and he said it's like getting into the ocean. I don't know about you, Mark, but have you ever gone snorkeling or scuba diving?
Yes, yeah.
It's quite when I was traveling. I remember going in some pretty dangerous waters. I remember it was in Australia, but you hear about shark attacks. There's nothing more scary than getting into an ocean and having that restricted view.
Yeah, and dunking your head under for the first time. It's
dunking around. And I actually did a night dive once when I was in Australia in the Barrier Reef. It was amazing. I went down.
Nuts.
I know, right? And the funny thing is that the instructor had said to us, it was a scuba diving training week on a boat in the Barrier Reef. Absolutely the highlight of my life, one of them. And we'd got our license, our PADI license. We could go down to 15 meters and then a bit lower to the advance. And then they said, right, we're going to do a night dive. And then we're standing there and it's pitch black, and they gave us this torch. You'd love this, because when you go in the water, the torch becomes like a lightsaber. It's nothing. It's like this massive shaft of light. And they said the reason you do it is you go down there because at night time, when you look at the colors of the coral with a torch, you see the real colors. Whereas when you're down during the day, I think it's refraction, not a physicist, but the sun hitting the water changes actually mutes the vibrancy of the colors. So that was the color time. But the reason I was telling you the story is I was standing on the edge of the boat, and my instructor, and I was absolutely cacking my wetsuit, which is not a good thing. And my instructor said to me, Mark, take a deep breath. Okay, you're absolutely fine. Just remember, there's nothing down there at night time that isn't down there during the day. And that was meant to calm me.
Is that true?
Earlier that day, I'd been around some coral and a shark swam past me, didn't see me, went on its way. And I'm like, yeah, thanks for that. But it was one of the most amazing experiences, because I got to experience like colors of like purple coral and fish, and it was just so intense. It was almost like 4D, like when you taste a strawberry that you've grown for the first time in your own garden, and you realize, oh, this is what a strawberry is meant to taste like. That experience of going into the ocean was like, oh, this is color. So it was just the most incredible. So I can understand how Damian has gone all in on this and is just like fascinated by it. Absolutely brilliant.
And he says you spoke about that it's a fear of the unknown. There's also a kind of a fear of getting it wrong. I think that's one of the big things that holds writers back, is that we think, you know what a notebook fanatic I am, and I fill up all these notebooks. And very often when I'll put, when I start a notebook or finish a notebook, I put it on social media, say, hey, finish a notebook, starting a notebook. And every time, I guarantee every time, I get a couple of people go, oh, I've got notebooks, but I'm too scared to put anything in them. I don't want to spoil them. And I'm like, no, look, this is what a writer does. You write all this nonsense in there, and you get it wrong in here. Yes. This is where you get it wrong. No one else has to see it except you. You've got to accept that you are going to get it wrong. You are.
Until they auction it off once you've snuffed it, Mark, and then of course you'll be getting like the inner minds of Mark Stay.
Yeah, if you can read my handwriting, good luck to her.
But there is a notebook brand out there. I don't know if it's a brand or a name of a notebook called "Destroy This Notebook."
Right.
It's this idea that you just deface it. You do whatever you need to do in it that will get your idea on paper.
Yeah, and that's great, because you have to accept, if you're going to go in the ocean, you have to accept you're going to get wet. If you're going to write something, you're going to have to accept you're going to get it wrong.
Yes.
And the first draft is going to be imperfect. The first words you write are going to be imperfect. You're going to get it wrong. But as you said earlier, when you were talking about your project, you're chipping away, you're sculpting away, you're smoothing edges, and then you discover what it's actually about. That's what the process is. That's what it's all about. So yeah, go in, get wet, come in, the water's fine. I mean, it's interesting what he said. Damian said it can't just be like the warm Caribbean Sea. It needs a bit of bite. And I think there's something in that, that fear can put a bit of fuel in your tank. But
well, it gets you swimming for starters. If you think there's something in there that shouldn't be there, you start swimming, and then what happens? You get warm. I mean, everyone knows that experience. I honestly, cold water and me, we don't mix. Kids have this asbestos skin. They just like our kids, they go camping and they jump in the water, and I like waltz in there going, oh, this would be nice. And it's like, oh, and I'm like running back out. And it's like, how do they do that? But what I do is I jump in now like head first, and then I start swimming like mad for like a minute until I actually the shock's gone off, and I've got used to the temperature, and that's what it is. You just gotta go in head first, get completely wet. Are we taking this analogy too far, Mark?
Maybe. You just made me think of it. You just made me think of a Billy Connolly routine about when he used to go swimming as a child in the North Sea off Scotland. It's a bit too rude to share here. But.
It's like Wim Hof. Well, have you heard about Wim Hof, the Iceman?
No.
He's a guy. I mean, he's done a BBC show now where they do these ice challenges where they get the celebrities. Do you remember that? The ice thing. This guy's amazing, but he spent his childhood swimming in the canals of Amsterdam. I mean, how he's even alive, I don't know. But this guy now, I mean, if you've never looked him up look at a documentary from Channel 4, it's on YouTube, I think, somewhere. Wim Hof, the Iceman, he literally does marathons in shorts and bare feet in the Arctic. And he also swims under ice that's, I don't know, like 1 or 2 feet thick. They cut a hole in the Arctic, and he gets in, swims underwater for like, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 meters. Most people, the minute they hit that water, would die instantly from shock. But he gets this, what he calls his inner fire or something. It's mind-boggling.
Well, look, if he can do that, listeners, you can dirty up a notebook and get a few words
desperately
wrong.
Desperately searching for a link there, Mark. But yeah, thank you very much. That's exactly. No, but I think this analogy's got legs, Mark. I think this idea of getting in the ocean, getting wet, it's a bit uncomfortable. But once you're in, and what does everyone say? Oh, it's quite pleasant.
Come on in, the water's fine. Yeah,
it's all right. Actually, I got used to it quite quickly. So
just before they're pulled under by a shark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What is that? Meg? I saw some poster for this.
Meg 2 is out.
Meg 2, and there's this little terrier dog. Have you seen the poster? Yeah. What is that all about?
Well, it's directed by Ben Wheatley, which is a real. I mean, let's not digress too much. Ben Wheatley is one of my favorite directors. I mean, he's, his Sightseers is the film I wish I'd written most. It's one of those films I was like, oh, I wish I'd done that. And he's done Free Fire and High Rise, and he's done really low budget movies. And now he's directing Meg 2, which is this mega huge blockbuster. Yeah. I've heard him interviewed about it. And he brought in all the little weird stuff. Like if you watch the trailer, there's a bit with a pedalo where these people in the pedalo are trying to pedal away from this giant shark. And the little pedals are going, it's brilliant. And it's like, yeah, that's a Ben Wheatley gag.
That's the new psycho noise, I guess. But I must admit, I've never seen that movie, because whenever I look at it, I just think they sat around the table and right, Jaws was really successful. How do we take it to that times 1,000?
It's based on a best-selling series of books, Meg.
Really?
Yeah, is this
another movie you're going to tell me I'm going to have to go and see now?
I haven't seen it yet, but I remember the books coming out and thinking, oh yeah, right, and they were huge, absolutely. I think there were 3 or 4 of them in the end, and each one there's more and more sharks, but yeah.
Actually, quick segue. COVID, cinema, a lot of people. It's the first time I've been in a full cinema for I can't think of how many years, and I've made a pact that I'm going to start going to cinema more often. So I think what we should do is we should do a segment on the show each week, because I know you go like almost every day, don't you? You've got some like mega
not quite, no.
but it seems like that. But I think we should do a new segment on the show where we share the movie that we've seen, the movie of the week, the bestseller experiment movie of the week. Love it. But it has to be the link has to be it's in some way useful for writers to go and see. Right, we've got to somehow link writing to it. So there you go. That's our challenge.
That's easy peasy.
I know. I knew it'd be easy for you, because you sit there with your notebook in the cinema going right. But I think that'd be a fun thing to do, because I do think we all need a good excuse to get back to the cinema, and I think it's important. Like, a lot of authors. We're going to hear it from a very successful author in a few weeks. Most important thing we should do as authors is to read more. But I also think we should allow ourselves to watch really well written films, because I think that inspires us. And it helps us dream about our book one day being in the cinema as well, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like visiting a bookstore. Brilliant. So we'll do that, folks, starting when one of us sees a movie next. But let's talk a little bit about this very interesting journey that Damian went on, where he was being sent books to adapt as a screenwriter. And he just came to this conclusion that I should just cut the middleman out. Exactly. And become an author. Brilliant.
Well, it's as he said, screenwriting can be demoralizing. You know, you can have a whole career writing and earning screenplays and earning money, and never have anything made. And you know, a lot of screenwriters get by on that. And I can tell you now, I've got so many unmade screenplays. You know, I've had 2 made out of that's dozens and dozens. You know, so which is quite a good hit rate for a UK screenwriter.
Well, that's the thing. You've got to almost, unlike as a screenwriter, you've got to write 10 times plus what you hope to get out there, which is what you said. Whereas this is the beauty. Let's just take a moment, stand back. Like this was the case for authors in the 19th century, in the most of the 20th century, when you couldn't publish your own book. And I think we should celebrate the fact that we now have this. I mean, I know we're all, you know, it's all out there, but we do have to stop sometimes and just say, wow, what an incredible time we live in. Because again, when we take the wide angle lens back, and, you know, people are studying the history of publishing in 100 years from now, they will be talking about this as a Renaissance period. It's when people could express, they had their own platform, they could write a book and put it out there with none of these issues of, because I'm thinking about how many authors are there that were born, say, I don't know, 1850, who spent their entire life writing books and their entire life pitching books to publishers and never ever had a single piece of work ever published. I mean, how many in the world? There'd be absolutely thousands upon thousands of people.
Actually, you were talking about movies for writers and talking about Barbie. See Greta Gerwig's previous film, her adaptation of Little Women. There's a bit where, I've forgotten the name of the character, but played by Saoirse Ronan, goes to a New York publisher to negotiate with her publisher. It's brilliant. It's so much fun. What
era is Little Women again? Is that?
It's just after the American Civil War, so 1860s, 1870s. So yeah,
that's a good. I just suddenly thought, how ironic. Greta Gerwig, she did Little Women and then she went to Barbie.
Yeah, I never made that connection. Very good, yeah.
Right? Brilliant. God knows. Okay, so competition time, folks. What's the next movie she's going to make? Follow that progression. What is the next movie after Barbie? Oh, brilliant stuff. Yeah, I think it's very important. And then you see the flip side of it. You see the flip side of what happened to Damian when, you know, he's got this team, not just a person at the publisher, but a team of people working with him on his books at Random House. And then there's the Penguin takeover. And then the entire Random House team are disbanded. And this is an interesting thing to talk about, because I think when people get into a traditional publisher, I think the stereotype, and again, I'm talking from someone who hasn't done that yet. So Mark, you can obviously talk about this from having achieved it, but it's not a guarantee that the rest of your career is set and you've got this group of people that you work with. It's a bit like in a company, if you're working with a group of people, like at any moment, one of those people or an entire department could get like cut or move on. And then we've heard this before, haven't we, of authors being kind of slightly stranded when their supporters, if you like. Yeah. The people that made it happen go.
The editor doesn't just edit your book. They are your champion within the company. So it starts at the acquisition meeting when they champion you to the other members of the acquisition team to take you on and to take a risk on you, to risk, the money, the advance money. which is getting smaller. And then there'll be a presentation to the sales and marketing teams and publicity teams, that they're champion there. And that continues all the way up to publication and post-publication. They'll be saying, okay, we're looking for titles for a Kindle promotion this month. Your editor has to make a case for you then. So they are very much banging the drum for you within the walls of the publisher. So when that happens with something like the Random House, the Penguin Random House sort of merger, it can be devastating when you lose your editor. I mean, I've been lucky in that the editor who took me on at Simon Schuster left to become an agent, and then I got another editor who I knew from my work at Orion, and she did 2 books, and now she's left, and now I'm on my 3rd editor in 4 books. But they've all been great, But you do hear horror stories where authors have been assigned to an editor who is either overloaded with work or just not right for them, and it doesn't click. And
they've still got
and you've still got 2 books to deliver in your contract, which must be really tough.
A lot of it comes down to personality. Like if an author and editor just don't vibe together, then that makes for a much harder relationship and more debating maybe. But it also, the fact that you've had 3 editors over the series of books, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like it's the way they bring in different directors for the series of movies, and you get like a different writer for each. Well, that's not a good example actually, but like how in series they have different writers for different.
The director
episodes.
thing's a good analogy actually.
Yeah, interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah. But they've all been
now, folks. There's so much more we want to talk about. So in the extended this week, we are going to talk about DIY tie-ins. Now, folks, listen, this is a biggie, because if you're thinking, how do I make money out of my books? Well, we're going to talk about a concept that we've been chatting about, which is every author should have some other commercial venture linked to their book, like Damian has. And we're going to talk a bit about his side business. It's probably making more money than his books, looking at the website. So if you're interested in that, join us for the extended. We're also going to dive in, and Mark's going to give us a deep dive on writing senses, which is going to be absolutely fascinating. So folks, if you'd like to support the podcast, get access to all this great content, you can either join the academy.bestsellerexperiment.com, where all of this is indexed for you. You can search for it very, very easily, dive into whatever you need to learn about this week, or pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and join up to our Patreon. So
links in the show notes.
Yeah, all in the show notes, folks. Absolutely. So, folks, thanks very much for joining us in the extended and for supporting this podcast. So, Mark, let's dive straight in. You wanted to talk about writing senses.
Writing the senses. Well, yeah, I mean, I loved what Damian was saying about linking it to something unexpected, how he described cheeks like you might find in the bend of a seashell. It's brilliant. So I thought what we'd do, we're going to talk about writing sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. I know there are others and we might touch upon them too, but let's talk about the basics for these. So let's talk about writing sight, which I think is probably the most used of the senses in fiction, but I've got a little exercise for you. Stand in a room or before a building or a landscape and make notes of everything you see. Look for colour, texture, size, shape. Then just choose 2 or 3 things to focus on for your writing. The things that are going to be the most effective in evoking a sense of that place for the reader, because I know it can be overwhelming, and we've had conversations about this in the academy where people go, well, what do I describe the whole room? Do I have to put everything in? It's like, no. Just pick the stuff that's really going to work. That's going to help the reader paint a picture in their head. Pick the most effective thing. So you can say the barn is constructed of wood, painted black, but it's more evocative just to note the flaky paint, the rusty satellite dish, the cracked window, the cobwebs around the guttering. You see how that's painting a picture as you just give those little details. Direct the reader's eye to the stuff that tells a story. This is the big note for writing for all of the senses. Look for the effect rather than a description. Okay, so there might be a hard rain falling, but it's more interesting if the rain changes the color of her dress, makes his hat floppy, it flattens her hair. Give it the effect. It's telling the story. And with colors, I mean, we've touched on colors in our interview with Damian, but Just to add to that, keep it simple. No one's impressed by your use of chartreuse instead of green, especially if they have to stop reading and look up what that means. Focus on the feel of the colour. It can be a stuffy red, an electric blue, a fizzy pink. Beware of all the usual cliches, blood red, jet black, all that kind of stuff. It's all been done. Think of relative comparisons. The autumn sun was a buttery yellow. That thing, the cheeks like the colour you might find in the bend of a seashell. Absolutely brilliant. I love it. And also we associate colours with feelings, feeling blue, seeing red. But if you put your sad character in a blue booth in a diner, your angry character could put on a red raincoat as she storms out of the house. Little touches like that. Don't overdo it. Too many colours can overwhelm a scene, and spare a thought for the colourblind. We touched upon this in the interview with Damian as well. Not everyone sees colour in the same way. So you don't have to overdo it, but a little goes a very, very long way. So that's sight. Let's talk about sound. Now, here's the thing. Ducks don't go quack. Okay, a lot of the cliches we've grown up with are accepted, but they're mostly false. You can blame a lot of movies for this. You watch any action movie, you think that a gun going off is an ear-splitting roar. One of my favourite bits of trivia is that Indiana Jones's gun in Raiders of the Lost Ark, his revolver, the sound they use is a shotgun. So every time he shoots a revolver, it's the sound of a shotgun. It's so much louder than anyone else's gun. So most modern weapons they're designed to be quiet. They're relatively quiet. They're banal. It's a flat sound. It's more like someone slapping or chopping wood. So listen with fresh ears. Don't go for the cliche. Go for something truthful. Now, the good news is you live in the age of the internet where sounds are in abundance. And if you go to something like YouTube, if you look at my YouTube history and the stuff I write, it's full of Spitfires and Messerschmitts and motorbikes and cars from the 1930s. So, and here's the thing, there's a little exercise for you. Go offline and go to a park or wood or a city centre and make notes about the sounds that you hear. Look for the ones that focus on telling a story. Keys dropped by someone running, the rustle of leaves where a hunter moves between the trees, the buckling of a wooden floor as the rising sun warms it. Sound is great for creating an atmosphere or a mood. Tranquil waves on a beach, birds in a wood, the incessant cacophony of car horns in a city, the distant peal of church bells, cricket playing on the radio in a den. These can give the reader an immediate sense of place. And think about how people talk. One of the characters in The End of Magic, he makes a noise like a squeaking hinge whenever he thinks. And everyone, once I put that on, I thought, great, that's his thing. That's his thing. And characters, do they talk from the throat or their belly? Does their voice change when they're stressed? Another thing to think about is synesthesia, which is where you hear a word but see a colour, or you hear music and see shapes. So you can have an angry man shouting, his words were bright red in my head. Now, few people experience synesthesia, but it's worth experimenting with for a dramatic effect. And also, all this sound, think about silence. I got a moment in The Crowfolk where all the birds in the woods stopped chirping. Silence can be really effective, especially when contrasted with noise. A silent place is really, really eerie. Now, we said ducks don't quack, but think about onomatopoeia, sort of honk, cuckoo, crash, bang, hiss, those words that imitate or resemble sounds. These can be hugely effective. But again, a little goes a long way. Use them sparingly. In the opening of The Crowfolk, I have the cars of jackdaws, which came from, actually, I was hanging around, I was waiting to pick up Claire from bell ringing, and there's a yew tree outside the church that just has all these jackdaws in it. And I was like, that is such a great sound, and I had to put it in there. I've also got the clonk of a cowbell as well. They're the only two sounds, and then it all goes quiet. Just get the rumble of the breeze. So, it can be really, really effective silence. Let's talk about writing taste. Now, this one's really tricky because it's so subjective. Also, we know that taste is all combined with smell and texture, so it can end up a right old mess if you're not careful. Again, look for story and character opportunities in your description. Your protagonist might be looking forward to a tasty sandwich, but maybe the bread is moist or too hard. So you can use this as an opportunity to express disappointment or rage or guilt. Who here hasn't felt the guilt of devouring an entire tub of Ben & Jerry's? No, just me then. Okay, taste can also trigger memories. Now, most famously, Proust describes how the taste of a Madeleine dipped in tea triggers a forgotten childhood memory. And Pixar completely pinched this for Ratatouille, that bit of Ratatouille where the food critic has the ratatouille and becomes a boy again. Brilliant. So think about your own Madeleine effect. Chewing gum makes me think of exams and revision. Roast chicken and gravy makes me think of childhood Sunday afternoons. What are those things that take you back? And again, try and avoid cliches if you can. Not every apple has to be crisp and crunchy and bursting with flavour. Sometimes they can be soft and warm and you can find half a worm in them. And look to mix up your adjectives as well. That apple might be crunchy, but it could also be as bright as the morning sun or as wet as a sponge. Have fun with it. Let's move on to smell. Like taste, this can evoke memories. Cigarettes and alcohol take me back to pubs in the 80s. Cigars make me think of my Uncle Desmond. As a child, you might recall going to a friend's house for dinner and encountering all sorts of new weird smells as you step over the threshold. Now think about allocating a smell to a particular character. If your serial killer reeks of carbolic soap, then your hero or victim could smell them coming before they see them. And smell can also create intimacy between characters. A father and son can bond over the smell of paint and varnish as they build a go-kart together. And combining scents can work really well. A bar can stink of sweat and bleach where someone has mopped up a horrible spill, Surprise the reader. People might be used to seeing a sports event on TV, but what does a rugby match actually smell like? Same goes for the battlefield, the Arctic, the desert, places few of us go, but we think we know. You don't necessarily have to go there, but maybe research it, look into it. People who've been there, what do they bring? What are those smells that evoke that sense of place? And for familiar places, close your eyes and take it in. Maybe leave the room and come back in later when you're more likely to notice the smell. Now, this is where I start to sound like a stuck record, but look for the telling and truthful details that tell a story. The wife who notices her husband is suddenly wearing cologne. The stench of death in the bathroom. We get that with mice because we live in the country and they get caught by traps. The smell of gasoline just before your house is burnt to the ground by a pyromaniac. Little bits of story smell. Then finally onto touch. Now we're all familiar with the five senses as defined by Aristotle that are related to our sensory organs, but there are technically many, many more. Neurologists reckon there are 9 actually. And so many of these extra senses are related to touch, pain, temperature, body awareness of the space around you, your sense of balance and gravity, the blood rushing in your veins, hormonal senses such as pheromones, your hunger for food and thirst for water, your need for air to breathe, and the mental and psychic senses of distress, a sense of self, love, friendship. These are all senses. But let's keep it simple with touch. Now, we really can take this one for granted, but it can be really effective. Think of ill-fitting clothes rubbing against your skin, those plastic chairs you sat in at school that numbed your backside and curved your spine, the tingle of an insect crawling on your skin, the scalding heat of boiled water. Touch is one of the most effective ways of drawing the reader closer into the story. If you can make them feel the cold mud as your protagonist crawls to freedom, or the sand between their toes on a desert island, then they will be far more receptive to your characters. And then describing pain, which, because a lot of us write dramatic stuff, this is something we're going to have to do. But again, keep it simple. Focus on what's important for the story. If you're running to get a message to the front line before the soldiers go over the top, then a stitch in the side or a twisted ankle is much more story-worthy than a sore thumb. And channel your own experiences if you can. I mean, I've had kidney stones, and that can be very handy in describing agony over the years. And think of the emotional impact of pain. It's not just searing pain, it's the panic of never being the same. I've got a scar on my hand here, and I remember getting that when I was 11. And I recall the feeling of knowing that I would never be the same again, that emotional impact of pain as well. So yeah, that's a little quick roundup of writing for the senses. So yeah, for you to cut out and keep and listen back to at your leisure.
Absolutely brilliant. It really does. It makes you realize just how essential this is. And when you were talking about sound in particular, I was thinking that we do need to think about creating soundtracks for our books in the same way that we, as a composer, as a music composer, obviously, I know how essential a good soundtrack is to a film. And yet we never really talk about soundtracks of a book. And when one of our authors was talking about how they go back and they add, and I think you do this as well, that you add in kind of new layers.
Layers. Yeah.
I think that's a good point, isn't it? To think about that senses can also be added in layers. When do you do a senses pass when you write?
Absolutely, it's one of the. These are the kind of details that I don't worry about for a first draft necessarily. I might put in place markers or whatever just to remind me that I need to work on this. It's the kind of thing that if you try and get it on your first draft, you're in danger of bogging yourself down and thinking, "Oh God, how do I describe a sunset for the umpteenth time?" You know.
So in many ways, it's you're creating the paint by colours outline when you're writing your first draft, and then you're colouring it in. On the next passes through, you actually get your paint box out.
Yeah, it's a really good way of thinking of it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Fantastic. That's brilliant, Mark. Really, really, really good. Let's also talk about this idea of DIY tie-ins, because Damian's got this very interesting, again, another first. We went and had a look at his website, didn't we?
It's fantastic.
Damian Dibben website, DamianDibbenFurniture.com. Yes, colour. My goodness me. So these are a collection, the Colour Storm collection, and there are just many very interesting bits of furniture, from a lapis skull that we think looks a bit like a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull with blue velvet.
I clicked on that. I thought, that was the first thing. I thought that'll look good on the shelf behind me. It's £1,250. So I've got to save up a bit.
That's 1,500 or so US dollars for people across the pond there. But I'm looking at this and looking at the kind of cost of these items. They're all upwards of high hundreds, low thousands, and more. And I was thinking to myself, wow, if he sells one of these, he's probably made as much money as he'd make on how many books? I don't know what the royalty is on one book these days, a paperback, but it's going to be
paperback. If a paperback's about £10, the author gets about 70 pence on each sale.
Right.
That's if it's sold at full price. Yeah.
So he'd have to sell for a 1,000 item in his furniture store. He'd have to sell, upwards of like 1,300 books, which is quite a chunk of books.
Yeah.
So it got us thinking, didn't it? Is there something we're missing as authors? And this is more for the entrepreneurial author, I guess, in many ways, but shouldn't we be thinking about tie-ins for our book? Like, everyone can write and publish their own book now, but we can also all set up a shop and sell something else. Now, I know that you do, I mean, obviously everyone instantly goes to, merchandise. And I know that you do that. Don't you? What do you have in your store, Mark?
I've got T-shirts and tote bags so far, and I was inspired by a friend of the podcast, Jeevani Charika, who also does T-shirts, and she sent me to T-Mill, which it's all free to set up. It took me an afternoon to sort of set these things up, and again, it's one of these things I will earn more selling a tote bag than I will on a copy of a paperback.
Yeah, but then you buy the paperback, you buy the tote bag to put the paperback in.
Exactly.
And you walk off down the park. Yeah. But it got me thinking that we're maybe missing a trick here. If a lot of authors are thinking, I'm not making enough money from my books. What if there's something that you could do, right? What if there's something that you could do which actually tied in with your book? Now, one example I had was, imagine you're writing about particular your thrillers based in, I don't know, a town in Devon. Why not go to the tourist office, and because you're putting that place on the map. It might be the whole of Devon, or it might be a place in Devon, and say, look, I'm writing this book and I'm going to be doing a ton of publicity around it. I'm going to be doing some interviews and the like, and I would love to do a deal with you. Why don't you I'll do the promotion of it. You put in the marketing budget of, I don't know, say, chuck £5,000 in. I mean, make it up. But like, imagine if they think, actually, this is great. And they have a look at the book and they like the book. And maybe you've got a front cover, which is showing off the beauty of Cornwall or Devon. But there's always these opportunities where we have to step outside the box of, this is how we publish books. Oh, we do this. We put it on Amazon and then we promote the book. But actually, everything helps each other. So if you've got your tourist office promoting this book and they put a massive feature about your book in their magazine, or they include it in their advert, or they put it for sale beside their, there's so many different times that could come from one conversation with a local organization who can benefit from you putting something on the map. And it might not be a location. It could also be a person. It could be a sport. It could be an activity. There's always groups that are interested in how, and they're all sitting around scratching their heads going, so what kind of promotion campaign are we going to do this year to help tourists come to our town? And I think that we need to get a little bit more inventive as authors and think of it that the book is central to this other like world building in many ways, this business world building of things around the edges of the book. And any kind of link, whether it's tenuous or obvious, could be an incredible way of you making as much, if not more money from the book. And if you get those kind of tie-ins set up before or as you're writing the book, it kind of really helps to guarantee a lot more success moving forward.
Absolutely. I've got a good example for that in my own household, and it's not me. So Claire, Claire did a trilogy of early reader books about growing plants, the Lottie and Dottie books, where two children plant seeds and what have you. Well, the obvious one was if you buy it direct from her, you get a packet of seeds, that kind of thing, and she would do that at school events and things like that. But also she's talking, I don't know if she's doing it this year, but we're talking about doing like a seed advent calendar. Doing it via Etsy. So the idea is you get the book, but you also get a seed and she'll put different seeds in it. And, because advent calendars are huge. It's not just a thing of peeling something back and getting a bit of, cheap chocolate. People pay big bucks for advent calendars now, and it becomes a kind of a family. You get gin advent calendars, wine advent calendars, Lego advent calendars, So if there's something that you think's pertinent to your particular book, why not think of something like that? So beyond that, there again, notepads, and you can get notepads made to order, that sort of thing. Stationery. We had Katie Ford on recently. She had that kit sort of based on the kit that her mother gave her, sort of the Essential Writers Kit.
There's another one. So clever. So there's definitely a growing trend of authors thinking outside of the book. I like that, thinking outside the book instead of thinking outside the box. But I think there's definitely that's where my mind, it's weird as well, writing nonfiction, I'm already thinking, retreats, online apps, all kind like workbooks and things. So there's a much bigger universe, I think, already for nonfiction, because you're out in the real world, I guess, in many ways. But I just want people, first, we'd love to hear from you. If you've done something like this, a bit out of the box, that's been really successful, has really worked, or given you some great experience, let us know, and we'd love to kind of shout about your book and what you did. But also, if you're thinking of doing it, like, send us in your idea. What is it that you might try and do? Like, get those thinking caps on, because there's such a bigger world out there. And I think this is, Damian's really showed us a real extreme of that. When you go and look at his website, you'll see what we mean. So,
links in the show notes, folks. Do check it out. It's a feast for the eyes. Brilliant.
Really, really interesting. Excellent stuff. So I think we'll leave it there, Mark, for the extended, because we've really covered a lot today. So if you found that useful, we'd really appreciate, folks, if you would share what we do behind the scenes here at the podcast. Absolute gold dust information that we hold back for the good folks that support this show. So please let people know about the Academy and how they can support the podcast as well. And thank you so much for all of your support as well, folks. So Mark, what's happening with wins this week?
Oh, I've got such a good one. So Laura Shepherd, been with the BXP team years. A really valuable member of the team. And I've known this has been coming for a little while, so we've all been sort of sitting on this news. But it was announced on the bookseller this week. Laura Shepherd, she says, I've got some wonderful news. My debut, The Trials of Lila Dalton, is being published by Pushkin Vertigo on 1st of February 2024. And look, I was sent a proof. I'm a lucky boy. I got a proof. And it's absolutely... But now I'm going to read you a bit of the blurb as well. First of all, a quote from Sophie Hannah. Unputdownable from the first page. As the mystery deepens, readers will be on the edge of their seats, desperate to know what happens next. That's from Sophie Hannah. It's on the back there. It says, written by a British barrister, Laura, who has worked on several high-profile cases. This thrillingly inventive depiction of a UK courtroom is rooted in her extensive experience. And I'm just going to read the blurb for you here. So this is, Lila Dalton has no memory of how she got to this courtroom. The man in the dock is accused of mass murder and she's his barrister, but she can't remember anything about the case. She can't remember anything at all. Lila is stranded on an island hundreds of miles from the UK where they try domestic and foreign criminals for the most serious crime. crimes. The next plane doesn't leave for days, and she's being watched. Someone keeps breaking into her hotel room to leave cryptic notes, threatening her with deadly consequences if she doesn't get her client off. Can Lila Dalton win her case and solve the mystery of her own identity? What a belter. Whoa. This has got smash hit all over it. It's fantastic. So I'm just over the moon for Laura. This is so well deserved. She's worked so hard to get this far, and it's just brilliant.
I think it's great, and congratulations, Laura, for all the success you've had so far and all the successes to follow. And this is what's lovely about the BXP team is we've got to journey with so many authors, and sometimes it is over. I mean, the BXP team has now been going nearly 6 years because we started it pretty much when we launched the podcast. And it's just an amazing place to hang out. And honestly, the level of success, I know that for the number of people we have in it, it's a small exclusive group, but the number of people we have in it, the level of success is unproportionally huge compared to, I think, other writing groups. So congratulations, Laura. And if you want to be a part of the BXP team, you can become that by just joining the Academy. And that's part of what you get as part of the membership. And you get to hang out with all kinds of amazing authors. And we will be reporting back on Laura's journey as we hear more.
Now, another friend of the podcast, another member of the BXP team, Mike Shackle. Love Mike. Now, he wrote the Last War trilogy for Gollancz, which is We Are the Dead, A Fool's Hope, Until the Last. He said, I was really gutted when Gollancz decided not to make hardbacks of my books when they originally published them. However, all good things come to those who impatiently wait. So excited that the Broken Binding are doing these collector editions, and these are absolutely gorgeous. Now, for those who don't know, Broken Binding do limited edition. They have sprayed edges. They've got these amazing covers on them as well. They're just phenomenal. So this is the thing. It's, you have your book first published. Maybe you wanted a hardback, you don't get a hardcover, but these books never really die. There's different ways to revitalize your books and bring them back to life. So I'm going to share a link in the show notes so everyone can check that out because they look absolutely fantastic. Really, really cool. Mr. D, now you're not the only one making a public declaration this month as well. We've got Andrew Guile, again in the BXP team. He said, right, I'm going to make a public declaration in an attempt to turbo boost my first draft. I've been logging my words on the 200 words a day challenge and have been pretty consistent. Mage Asylum is over 12,000 words now and is up and running, but I feel I need to get more momentum with it. So I declare that I will finish a first draft before the end of 2023. I reckon it will come out at 80,000 words. So that's 68,000 to go in 5 months or 21 weeks, which is 462 words a day. Come on. So brilliant. Andrew, congrats with that. Good luck. Good luck. And Lynn Milford over on Twitter, she's doing the 200 words a day challenge, but she's editing. She says 10 chapters edited today and concentration span has gone off the boil. Does this count as 200 words a day? Yes, it does. What's our exchange rate for editing? Our
exchange rate is 20 minutes for 200 words. So if you edit for 20 minutes, you bank the 20 minutes edited because you can do that on the form. Yep. And that's your 200 words. That's amazing. Though. 10 chapters.
That's
brilliant.
It's really good.
Absolutely
really
exciting.
So amazing.
And we should mention, if you want to do the 200 word challenge, it's 200wordchallenge.com.
Fantastic. So folks, if you've got a win, drop us a line, get in touch. You can contact us at bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. On social media, on Facebook, we're Bestseller Experiment. On Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, we are at BestsellerXP.
Brilliant. And in the extended this week, we talked about anyone who has set up a side business linked to their books, and we did a whole brainstorming around how you can make more money. And so if you are one of those people, I just want to put it out there to the main audience. So if you've done that successfully, tell us what it is that you've done. Is it furniture? Is it a handbag range? Is it a deal with the local tourist office? Whatever it might be, let us know, because we'd like to talk about it and share, because we think this is a definite route for definitely self-published authors, well, even traditionally published authors. I mean, why not? Like, go for it. So, and it will help us to make additional funds, which is obviously a value to every author out there. So brilliant stuff. Do check out, and if you want to hear more about that, check out the extended. It was a whopper this week. Absolutely brilliant.
Big one. Yep.
All right, folks. So thank you so much, Mr. Stay, this week. It's been absolutely brilliant fun. Can't wait to hear what's happening in your world next week. And for everyone out there writing this week, I want to just leave you with one thought, and that is this week could be the week when you write your best words. So get writing, folks. And on that note, it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.